Sweetheart, men with twice your training have missed that ridge. Go make coffee. Corporal Ryan Mitchell said it loud, so the whole shelter would hear, then spat on the frozen ground beside a rifle case and laughed. The other soldiers laughed with him. 1,600 meters out, an enemy sniper had already pinned them for 11 hours. Wounded 2 men turned the valley into a grave. And command had sent a woman. Claire Morgan didn't argue. She didn't fire back. She just knelt, opened her case, and let them laugh because she knew something they didn't. In 2 hours, every man in that room would be holding his breath for her. Before we go further, if a story about respect that has to be earned the hard way is the kind of story you love, take 1 second and subscribe to this channel. Stay with me until the very end and comment the city you are watching from right now so I can see just how far Claire's story has traveled. The wind came down off the Colorado peaks like it had a grudge, and inside the temporary command shelter, 12 exhausted soldiers were slowly running out of hope. They had been pinned for almost 11 hours. A single enemy marksman dug into a ridge somewhere past 1,600 meters had turned an open training valley into a killing floor. 2 men were down with simulated wounds that felt real enough when you were the one lying on a cot with a medic pressing a compress into your shoulder. The mission clock kept ticking, and nobody, not one man in that unit, had a solution. Corporal Ryan Mitchell had been the loudest voice in the shelter for hours. He was 34 years old, built like a door, and he had 11 confirmed long-range engagements to his name. He was the kind of man other men listened to because he had survived the kind of days that make you either quiet or dead. And right now, Ryan Mitchell was out of ideas, and he hated being out of ideas more than he hated anything else in the world. We wait for weather, Ryan said, for the 3rd time. Ceiling drops, we get air support. We pull the wounded. We regroup. That ridge is a coffin. Anybody who tries to counter that shooter from here is walking into it. Weather's not dropping, said Sergeant Alvarez, staring at a battered tablet. System stalled. We've got hours of this at least. Then we hold, Ryan said. We can't hold. That was Private Dawson, young, jaw tight, eyes rimmed red. Miller's shoulder's a mess. He needs extraction and the LZ is exposed. That shooter owns the whole valley. Every time we move, he reminds us. The shelter went quiet because Dawson was right, and being right did not help anyone. It was in that silence that the flap of the shelter pulled back and the cold came pouring in, and a woman stepped through carrying a long rifle case in one gloved hand. She was not tall. She was not loud. She had a plain face made plainer by exhaustion and a knit cap pulled low, and she moved with the kind of economy that comes from people who never waste emotion because motion costs energy and energy is precious. She set the case down just inside the door, straightened, and looked around the room. I'm Staff Sergeant Claire Morgan, she said. Advanced reconnaissance. Command sent me for the ridge. For a full 3 seconds, nobody said a word. Then Ryan Mitchell laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, not at first. It was the laugh of a man who is so tired and so cornered that the universe finally handed him something absurd enough to break the tension. Command, he said, sent you. Command sent me, Claire repeated, for the ridge. For the ridge. Ryan rubbed a hand down his face and looked around at the other men, inviting them to share the joke. A couple of them looked away. A couple of them grinned. Nobody stopped him. Sergeant Morgan, Ryan said, and he made her rank sound like a costume she was wearing. Do you understand what's out there? 1,600 meters. Crosswind that changes its mind every 90 seconds. Snow on the glass. Elevation angle that'll eat your come up if you breathe wrong. I have watched men with a decade on you put 3 rounds into that ridge and hit nothing but rock. Real men, trained men. I understand what's out there, Claire said. Do you? I read the range card on the drive up. I read the wind log your team's been keeping. I read the 2 engagement reports from this morning. She paused. Whoever's been logging wind for you is doing a good job, by the way. That's rare. That stopped Ryan for half a second because he was the one logging the wind. And being complimented by the person you have just decided to dismiss is a strange and unwelcome feeling. Flattery, he said. Cute won't hit the ridge for you. I'm not trying to flatter you, Corporal. I'm telling you your data's clean. That matters to me. It's most of the job. Private Dawson watched this back and forth like a man at a tennis match, and something in him, Some raw, exhausted hope latched onto the calm in her voice. "You've made shots like this before?" he asked. Claire turned to him, and here was the first thing that surprised them, though most of them would not admit it until much later. She did not puff up. She did not tell a war story. She did not do the thing men do when their competence is questioned, the chest out, the list of medals. "I've missed shots like this before," she said. "That's why I'm careful now." Dawson blinked. Ryan snorted. "She's missed shots like this," Ryan said to the room. "Fantastic. That's the recommendation we're going with." "You want somebody who's never missed?" Claire crouched by her case and flicked the two latches. They opened with a soft double click that seemed very loud in the quiet. "Then you want somebody who's never taken a hard shot. I'm not that person. Neither are you. That's why we're both still alive." The latch clicks did something to the room. It is hard to explain unless you have been in a place like that, but the sound of a professional opening their tools has a way of settling nerves, even the nerves of people who have decided not to trust the professional. Men leaned in slightly. Somebody stopped fidgeting. Ryan Mitchell felt the shift, and he did not like it, so he pushed harder. "Let me tell you why they sent you," he said, stepping closer, lowering his voice so it was almost kind, which made it worse. "It's not because you're the best shooter they had. It's a training exercise. There's a review board. There's a general somewhere who wants a nice photo of a woman making a hard call in the field so they can put it in a brochure. You're a photo op, Sergeant, and when you miss that ridge, and you will, I'm going to be the one who called it, and everybody in this shelter is going to remember I called it." The room got very still. Claire looked up at him from where she knelt. She was not angry. That was the thing Dawson would remember for the rest of his life. She was not angry, and she was not hurt, and she was not scared. She looked at Ryan Mitchell the way you look at weather, something to be understood, accounted for, and then worked around. "You might be right," she said. Ryan blinked. He had been braced for a fight. He had wanted a fight. Fighting was easier than sitting in a shelter feeling useless. "About the brochure," Claire went on, standing now, her rifle in her hands but not raised, just held, the way a carpenter holds a level. "Maybe somebody upstairs wants a photo. I can't control that. I don't care about that. Here's what I care about. There are two men on those cots who need to be somewhere warm and safe. And there's a shooter on that ridge who is deciding right now whether he's bored enough to make it 3. I can either help with that or I can't. If I can't, I'll pack up and get out of your way, and you can hold and pray the ceiling drops. But I'm not going to argue with you about whether I belong here, Corporal, because that argument doesn't move either of those men 1 inch closer to a helicopter." Nobody spoke. Ryan opened his mouth, closed it, and Sergeant Alvarez, who outranked both of them and had been quiet in the corner watching this whole thing with tired eyes, finally said, "Let her look." "Sergeant," Ryan started. "I said let her look, Mitchell." Alvarez stood. He had the kind of authority that did not need volume. "We've got nothing. She's got a case. Right now the case is winning. Morgan, you want to see the ridge? I'll walk you to the OP. Everybody else, stand down and quit clucking." That should have been the end of the doubting. It was not, of course. Doubt does not die because a sergeant tells it to. It just goes quiet and waits. But it was a beginning. Claire followed Alvarez out into the cold, and Ryan Mitchell watched her go, and Private Dawson watched Ryan, and Ryan's face was doing something complicated. Because underneath the mockery, underneath the wounded pride of a man who had run out of answers, there was a small and unwelcome thought forming, and the thought was this. She did not argue. Every soldier he had ever met who was faking it argued. The fakers always argued, because arguing was how you filled the space where the skill was supposed to be. She had not filled the space. She had walked past it. He did not know what to do with that thought, so he shoved it down and told himself she would miss. Out at the observation post, the wind hit Claire full in the face and she let it. Alvarez pointed. Ridgeline, past that dead pine, the notch, then the shale field. He moves between 3 positions we've identified. Maybe more we haven't. He's patient, disciplined. He's not a kid. No, Claire agreed, settling behind the scope they had set up, adjusting nothing yet, just looking. He's not a kid. You really think you can reach him? Claire was quiet for a long moment. The wind pulled at the edge of her cap. I think, she said finally, that if I take that shot right now, I miss. And if I miss, I've told him exactly where I am. And I've told him he's better than we are. And then he owns not just the valley, but our heads too. So no, not right now. Alvarez studied her. So what do you do right now? Nothing. She pulled back from the scope. I do nothing for a while. And I know that's going to be the hardest thing for those men to watch, because they're scared and they want to see somebody doing something. But the shot isn't the work, Sergeant. The shot is the last 1%. The other 99 is knowing, and I don't know enough yet. Back inside, when Claire returned and quietly asked for a corner and a place to set up her spotting gear, Ryan Mitchell watched her lay out her instruments with an ache in his chest he did not have a name for. She had a small weather meter, a notebook, a real paper notebook, worn soft at the corners, a pen. She held the meter up, watched the little numbers, wrote something down, held it up again, wrote again. Fascinating, Ryan said. She's doing arts and crafts. But nobody laughed this time. That was the second shift, and it was smaller than the first, and it mattered more. The first time, the room had laughed with him. This time, the room did not. Dawson drifted over to where Claire had set up. He crouched a respectful distance away, the way you approach a wild animal you are not sure is safe. What are you writing? He asked. Claire glanced at him. He was young, younger than her by 5-6 years, maybe more. His hands were shaking a little, and not from the cold. Wind, she said, every 90 seconds. Direction, speed, and how it feels. She tapped the meter. This tells me the numbers, but numbers lie in mountains, air pools in valleys. It rolls off ridges. The wind where I am is not the wind at 800 meters, and the wind at 800 is not the wind out at the target. I have to build a picture of the whole thing in my head, all of it, every layer, and the picture keeps changing. So I keep writing. How long does that take? As long as it takes. She wrote another line. Could be an hour, could be 4. Dawson swallowed. Miller doesn't have 4 hours. Claire's pen stopped. She looked at the young private, and for the first time something moved behind her calm, a flicker of the weight she was carrying and hiding well. I know, she said quietly. Believe me, son, I know exactly how much time Miller has. That's the clock I'm shooting against. Not the general, not the corporal. Him. She nodded toward the cots. So I'm going to work faster than is safe and slower than you want, and I need you to trust that those two things can be true at the same time. Dawson looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, and then he did something that changed the temperature of the whole shelter. He said, loud enough for the others to hear, what do you need? You want a second set of eyes on the wind? I'll call it. Just tell me what to look for. And a woman that half the room had written off 10 minutes earlier had her first volunteer. Ryan Mitchell watched Dawson kneel beside Claire, watched the kid take up a notebook of his own, watched Claire lean over and quietly point at something in the valley and explain it, patient as a school teacher. And the ache in his chest got worse. Because here was the thing about Ryan Mitchell that he did not tell people. He had been the guy nobody believed once. A long time ago, a skinny kid from a town nobody had heard of, in a room full of men who were sure he did not belong. And he had earned his place the hard way. One round at a time, one impossible day at a time. And he had promised himself he would never look down on somebody the way those men had looked down on him. And he had just spent 10 minutes doing exactly that. To a woman who had not argued, who had complimented his win log, who had said out loud in front of everyone that she had missed shots before, which was the single most honest thing anybody had said in that shelter all day. He stood there and he hated himself a little, and hating yourself is uncomfortable. So he reached for the old reliable comfort of certainty. She will miss, he told himself. Nobody makes that shot. She will miss, and I will be right, and this feeling will go away. He did not believe it as much as he had an hour ago. Corporal Mitchell, Claire's voice. She was not looking at him. She was looking through her scope. You logged a gust at 1,400 hours. Full value, right to left, hard. Then it died completely for about 4 minutes. You noted that. Ryan came over almost against his will. Yeah, weird pattern. Happened twice. 3 times, actually. You missed the third. It's smaller. She still did not look at him. There's a thermal cycle happening. The sun heats that south face, air rises, pulls a draft through the notch. Then it collapses and goes still. It's got a rhythm. If I can time it, there's a window. 4 minutes of dead air, maybe less. Ryan stared at the side of her face. You figured that out from my log. I figured it out from watching. Your log confirmed it. Now she looked at him. I couldn't have found the pattern this fast without those notes, Corporal. You did that. Whatever you think of me, you gave me half of what I need. So, she turned back to the scope. And Ryan Mitchell stood there with a compliment he had not earned and did not know how to refuse. And something in the wall he had built came loose. Not the whole wall, just a brick. But a wall only needs to lose one brick before you start to wonder about the rest of it. The third gust, he heard himself say. The one I missed. You want me to watch for it? I know what it looks like now. I can call the window. Claire did not smile, but something in her shoulders eased. Yeah, she said, I do. Get a notebook. Sit here. When the south face lights up gold, that's your 90-second warning. You call gold, I get ready. You call dead, I've got my window. You miss the call, I miss the shot, and Miller pays for it. No pressure. Ryan sat down beside her. A door, built like a door, folding himself down into the small, careful posture of a man about to do delicate work. Dawson glanced over, surprised. Alvarez in the corner allowed himself the smallest of nods. For a while, nobody spoke. There was only the wind and the scratch of two pens and the low occasional murmur of Claire calling numbers and Ryan confirming them. Then Alvarez's radio crackled. It was faint, broken, but the message got through and it turned the shelter cold in a way the mountain never could. All stations, be advised. Thermal drone caught movement on the objective ridge. Shooter has displaced. Repeat, shooter is on the move. New position unknown. Every head came up. He moved, Dawson breathed. Your whole picture, the wind, the rhythm, the position, he moved. Claire did not lift her eye from the scope. Yeah, she said, he did. So it's useless. All of it, 2 hours of watching, and he just... Dawson. Claire's voice was level. Breathe. He didn't leave. He displaced. There's a difference. He moved because he heard us calling in the drone, or he saw a reflection, or he's just disciplined and he moves on a schedule, but he's still up there. A shooter that good doesn't abandon a valley he owns. She made a small adjustment. He moved, so now I know something new. I know how he thinks under pressure. I know he flinches when he's watched. That's worth more than the position was. Ryan stared at her. You're telling me his best move just helped us. Everything helps us if we're paying attention, Claire said. That's the whole job, Corporal. It's not the trigger, it's the paying attention. The trigger's easy. Anybody can pull a trigger. Knowing when, knowing where, knowing that the man on the other end just told you he's nervous. That's the part that takes 20 years and 100 missed shots to learn. She sat back finally and rolled her neck and looked at the two men beside her, the young one and the doubting one, both of them now leaning in, both of them now hers. He's going to settle into a new position, she said, and when he does, he's going to be a little rattled and a little too eager to prove he's still in charge. And that's when he'll make his mistake. He'll show himself a second too long, and I have to be ready for that second because I only get one. How do you know he'll make a mistake? Dawson asked. Claire almost smiled then. Almost. Because I've been him, she said. The eager one. The one who has to prove it. I made that mistake a long time ago on a ridge like this one, and somebody I loved didn't come home because of it. Her voice did not shake. It just got very quiet and very true. That's the shot I missed, Private. That's the one I carry. And that's why I don't rush anymore. And that's why I'm going to sit here and watch and wait until my eyes hurt. And I'm going to let a room full of tired men think I'm hesitating because I would rather be doubted than be wrong. I have been wrong. Doubted is easier. The shelter was silent, not the mocking silence from before. A different kind. The kind that falls over a room when it realizes it has been in the presence of something real and did not recognize it in time. Ryan Mitchell looked down at his own hands, his confirmed engagements, his decade, all the days that had made him quiet or dead, and he had chosen quiet, and somewhere in there, he had also chosen certainty, because certainty was armor, and armor kept you from feeling the weight of the shots you did not take and the men you did not save. She had thrown her armor on the floor in front of a room full of strangers. She had said, "I have been wrong, and a man died," out loud, to people who wanted her to fail. That was not weakness. He understood that now, and understanding it cost him something. That was the strongest thing he had ever seen a person do. "Morgan," he said. "Corporal." "That thing I said, the coffee." He worked his jaw. Apologies did not come easy to men like Ryan Mitchell. They came out sideways, half strangled, but they came. "That was out of line. You didn't deserve it. I was scared and I was useless, and I put it on you because you were the newest thing in the room. That's on me, not you." Claire turned and looked at him, and for the first time since she had walked through that flap, she gave him something close to a real look. Not a professional's assessment of weather. A person seeing another person. "You want to make it right?" she said. "Yeah." "Then call gold when the south face lights up, and don't miss it. Everything else, all the words, we can do those over a beer if we both make it off this mountain. Right now, I need your eyes, not your apology." Ryan Mitchell nodded slowly, and then, unbelievably, he almost laughed. A real one this time, low and surprised. "You are the strangest shooter I have ever met." "I get that a lot." Alvarez's radio crackled again. Weather update. The ceiling was not dropping, no air support, no easy way out. On the cots, Miller stirred and groaned, and the medic looked over at the group by the scope with an expression that did not need words. "Time. There is no time." Claire heard it. She heard all of it, and she leaned forward and put her eye back to the glass, and the valley stretched out in front of her, 1,600 meters of wind and snow and shale, and one disciplined man hidden somewhere in it, who did not yet know that the person hunting him had already learned to think like him. "All right," she said so quietly that only Ryan and Dawson could hear it. "Let's find out where you went." And in a shelter, hiked in the frozen Colorado mountains, 12 exhausted soldiers who had spent the morning running out of hope found themselves, without quite knowing when it had happened, holding their breath for a woman most of them had laughed at an hour before. The wind kept changing, the clock kept running, and Staff Sergeant Claire Morgan settled in to wait for a window that might last 4 minutes, or might last 4 seconds, or might never come at all. Ryan Mitchell watched the south face of the ridge, waiting for it to turn gold, waiting to make good on the only apology that mattered. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, the loudest man in the room had nothing at all to say. The south face of the ridge stayed gray. For 18 minutes it stayed gray, and in those 18 minutes Claire Morgan did not move, and the men around her learned a new kind of misery, the misery of watching someone be patient when your whole body is screaming to act. "Come on," Dawson whispered. "Not to anyone, just to the mountain. Turn gold. Come on." "It'll turn when it turns," Claire said. Her eye never left the glass. "You can't rush the sun, Private. People have tried." Ryan Mitchell sat on her right, notebook open on his knee, and he was learning something he did not expect to learn at 34 years old, which was how little he actually knew about the thing he was best at. He had 11 confirmed engagements. He had thought that made him a shooter. Watching Claire, he was starting to understand that he had been a man who occasionally hit things, and that there was a discipline underneath the trigger that he had only ever touched the surface of. "Ask you something," he said. "Ask. You said you've been him, the shooter, the eager one." He kept his voice low so the cots would not hear. "You said somebody didn't come home. You don't have to tell me, but I'm sitting here watching you do this, and I need to understand what I'm looking at. So if you can." Claire was quiet for a moment, not the quiet of refusal. The quiet of a person deciding how much of a wound to open in a room full of people who might need her steady. "His name was Teller," she said finally. "My spotter. First real deployment for both of us. We had a shot, and it wasn't a good shot. The wind was wrong, and I knew it was wrong. And there was a colonel on the net telling me to take it, telling me the window was closing, telling me I was hesitating." She adjusted a dial by a fraction. "So I took it, to prove I wasn't scared, to prove I belonged. Same reason you told me to go make coffee, Corporal. Fear wearing a costume." Ryan flinched, but he did not look away. "I missed," Claire said, "and missing told them where we were. And Teller." She stopped. Her eyes stayed on the glass. "Teller was on my left. That's all. He was on my left, and I was the reason they knew where to look." Dawson had gone very still. So when you all sat in that shelter and decided I was a photo op, Claire went on, and her voice did not crack. It just got very level and very deliberate. You want to know why I didn't argue? Because I stopped needing to prove I belonged the day Teller didn't come home. I don't shoot to prove anything anymore. I shoot because two men on those cots need a helicopter and there's a disciplined killer between them and it. That's the only reason left that's worth pulling a trigger for. Everything else gets your spotter killed. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Ryan Mitchell very quietly said, I'm sorry about Teller. So am I, Claire said, every single day. Now watch the south face. And the thing was, they did. All of them, without being told, drifted their eyes to the south face of that ridge because a woman had just handed them the worst day of her life as an explanation. And the only thing you can do with a gift like that is honor it. Gold, Ryan said suddenly. South face, it's lighting up. Gold, Morgan, that's your warning. Claire's whole body changed. Not fast, smooth, the way a machine comes online. 90 seconds, she said. Everybody who isn't calling wind, be quiet and stay quiet. Dawson, watch the notch. Mitchell, you own the clock and the light. Tell me when it goes dead. Copy. The shelter held its breath. And then, 400 meters up a frozen ridge, the enemy shooter made his first appearance in over an hour, and everything Claire had built came down to seconds. Movement, Dawson hissed. The notch. Something moved in the notch. Claire found it, a shape, wrong angles for rock. The disciplined stillness of a man who thinks he is invisible. I have him, she breathed. Center notch, low. He's prone. He's settling in. Take it, Ryan said. And even as he said it, he heard himself, heard the colonel on the net in Claire's story, heard fear wearing the costume of urgency, and he hated it. No, wait, belay that. It's your shot, your call. And that, though none of them marked it in the moment, was the moment Ryan Mitchell became a spotter instead of a critic. The moment he stopped telling the shooter to take it and started trusting the shooter to know. Wind's still alive, Claire said. The face just went gold. The draft hasn't collapsed yet. If I shoot now, the bullet walks left and I miss him by a foot and I tell him exactly where we are. Her finger was off the trigger, resting alongside it. We wait for the collapse. Mitchell, the light. Talk to me. Still gold. Still gold. Ryan's voice was tight. He's settling. Morgan, he's getting comfortable if he ranges us first. He won't. He just got here. He's checking his own wind before he does anything. He's disciplined, remember? Discipline works both ways. He's going to be still for at least a minute doing exactly what I'm doing. A pause. Light. Still gold. Come on. Come on. And then Ryan's breath caught. Fading. It's fading, Morgan. South face going gray. That's your collapse. 90 seconds of dead air starting now, Claire said. Maybe less. Dawson, is he still in the notch? Still there, still prone. He hasn't moved. Then here we go. And she did not fire. Dawson nearly came out of his skin. He's right there. The wind's dead. Why aren't you? Because the wind isn't dead yet where he is, Claire said, and her voice was the calmest thing in the entire state of Colorado. It's dead here. It collapses here first. Then it rolls up the valley and it reaches him last. There's a lag. 4 seconds, maybe 5. I shoot on our dead air. His air is still moving. I miss. I have to shoot on his dead air. And his dead air is coming. She exhaled slow. 3, 2. Morgan, Ryan whispered. 1. And the enemy shooter, 400 meters up and 1,600 out, chose that exact moment to lift his head and shift his position, and the shape in the notch broke apart and slid backward into the rock and was gone. The silence in the shelter was total. He moved, Dawson said, and his voice cracked in half. He moved. You had him. You had him, and the wind was dead, and you waited, and he. Dawson. Claire pulled back from the scope for the first time in an hour and rolled her shoulder and looked at the young man with something that was almost gentle. If I'd fired a second earlier, I'd have hit where he was, not where he went. I'd have put a round through empty rock and lit us up like a Christmas tree. He's not gone. He repositioned inside his own hole. He'll settle again. And now I've watched him move twice, and both times he came up too fast and shifted before he was ready. She picked her pen back up. He's disciplined about waiting. He's not disciplined about settling. He fidgets. That's his tell. That's the crack in him. And I just watched it twice for free. Ryan stared at her. You didn't miss a shot just now. You collected data. I collected data, Claire agreed. The shot's coming. But I only get the real one once, Corporal. And I am not spending it until he shows me the fidget and then holds still like he means it. When he does both, when he pops up nervous and then forces himself to settle because he's embarrassed about being nervous. That's my 4 seconds. That's the whole game. Over on the cots, Miller made a sound. A bad sound. The medic, a lean, quiet man named Ortiz, pressed harder on the shoulder and looked up, and his face did the arithmetic that everyone was avoiding. Morgan, Ortiz said, I need a number. How long? Claire did not look away from the glass, but something in her jaw tightened. I can't give you a number, Doc. I can give you the truth. He's got a rhythm. He surfaces about every 20 minutes to reassert control of the valley. I've watched 2 cycles. The next time he comes up nervous, I take him. That could be 20 minutes. That could be 5. I don't control it. Miller might not have 20. I know. I'm just telling you. I know, Doc. And for 1 second, just one, the mask slipped, and they all saw the weight she was carrying, the same weight that had a name, and the name was Teller. I know exactly what I'm racing. I have raced it before and lost. I'm not going to lose it by rushing. That's the one thing I know for certain. Rushing loses. So I need everybody in this room to do the hardest thing soldiers ever have to do, which is nothing, and to do it while a good man hurts, and to trust that I hate the waiting more than any of you. Ortiz held her eyes for a moment. Then he nodded once and went back to Miller. And Ryan Mitchell, watching, understood that he was in the presence of a kind of courage he had never possessed. He had courage under fire. Everybody in that shelter had courage under fire. But Claire had the other kind, the rarer kind, the courage to be still and hated and doubted while the clock ran, the courage to let people believe you were failing because you knew that looking like you were failing was the price of not actually failing. He had never had that. He had always needed to be seen doing something. Fear wearing a costume. She had put it plainly, and it had gone into him like a blade because it was true. 20 minutes, he said to her quietly. Give or take. What do you need from me for 20 minutes? Keep logging the thermal cycle. And Mitchell. She glanced at him. Keep the room calm. They trust you. When they get scared, they look at you, not me, because you're the one they've bled with. So if you stay steady, they stay steady, and a steady room is a quiet room, and I need quiet to hear the valley. You following me? Ryan blinked. She had just handed him a job. A real one. Not a courtesy. The most useless he had felt all day, and she had reached into that uselessness and given him a purpose. And he understood in that moment that this was a kind of leadership he had never seen, the kind that made everyone around you more than they were. Yeah, he said, and his voice was rough. Yeah, I follow you. He turned to the room. Listen up. Nobody moves fast. Nobody talks loud. Nobody asks Morgan how long. She's working. This is what working looks like. It's ugly and it's slow and it's the best chance we've got, so we protect it. Dawson, you good? I'm good, Corp. You're not, but you're going to be. Watch the notch. That's your whole world right now, the notch. And for a while, the shelter found a strange, taut, terrible peace, the peace of people who have decided to trust someone. 19 minutes passed. The wind cycled. The south face went gold and gray and gold again. Claire logged it. Ryan logged it. Dawson watched the notch until his eyes watered, and then he blinked and watched some more. At the 21-minute mark, Alvarez's radio crackled and the piece shattered. All stations priority. Be advised, we have a second thermal signature on the objective ridge. Repeat, second signature. There may be 2 shooters. Confirm and advise. The word 2 dropped into the shelter like a stone into a still pond. 2, Dawson said. There's 2 of them. Morgan, there's 2. Claire did not react the way a person reacts to bad news. She reacted the way a person reacts to information, which was worse in a way, because it meant she had already understood the situation was this bad and had simply not said so. I know, she said. The whole room turned. You know, Ryan said. You knew there were 2? I suspected. Claire finally pulled back from the glass and looked at them. And there was no apology in her face, only the flat honesty that had unsettled them from the first minute. The displacement pattern was wrong for one man. When he moved off the first position, the valley didn't go quiet. There was still a set of eyes on us. I felt it. One shooter can't watch and move at the same time. Two can. One shoots, one spots, and covers. That's why he's owned this valley all day. It was never one disciplined man. It was a team, a good one. And you didn't say anything? Dawson's voice climbed. What would it have changed, Private? Claire said, not unkindly. You were already scared. Telling you there were two of them an hour ago just makes you scared for an extra hour. I tell you now because now it matters. Now it changes the shot. How does it change the shot? Claire looked back through the glass. Because if I take the shooter, the spotter becomes the shooter, and he already has a beat on wherever my muzzle flash comes from. The first shot has to count, and the second shot has to come about 3 seconds behind it, on a target I haven't located yet, before the spotter can range my flash and put one through this shelter. She said it with the calm of a woman reading a grocery list. So it's not one impossible shot anymore. It's two, back to back, 1,600 meters, and I've only got one confirmed position. The silence was so complete they could hear the wind working at the shelter's edges. That's not possible, somebody said from the back. One of the men who had laughed hours ago. Two shooters, both at 1,600, 3 seconds apart. That's not a shot. That's a miracle. It's not a miracle, Claire said. It's a lot of work and a little bit of luck, and I've done most of the work. But I need the spotter's position. I can't take two men I can only see one of. She turned to Ryan. Mitchell, when the shooter fires, the spotter is nearby. Same rock band, higher or lower, close enough to talk. When I locate the shooter, I need you locating the second thermal off the drone feed. Alvarez, can you get me that feed? Working on it. Work faster. She said it without heat, but it moved him. Because here's the part nobody's going to like. The next time the shooter surfaces, I have to let him shoot. I have to let him take a shot at us, and I have to watch where the spotter's eyes go when he calls the correction. Because that's the only way I find the second man. I have to give them a target. You want to bait them, Ryan said slowly. I want to bait them. With us. With me. Claire's jaw set. I move to the forward OP alone. I give them a silhouette worth shooting at. They take the shot. It misses, because at 1,600 through this wind, even a good team needs a ranging round, and I will not be where they range. But the ranging round tells me everything. The impact tells me the shooter's exact position, and the correction the spotter calls tells me his. Two shooters, one heartbeat of information, and then I have about 3 seconds to end both of them before they end me. Nobody breathed. No, Ryan said, absolutely not. You go out to that OP alone and you're dead. First round, second round, doesn't matter. You're a silhouette on a ridge and they're a team. That's not a plan, Morgan. That's a funeral. It's the only plan that finds the second man. Then we find another plan. There isn't one. And for the first time, Claire's voice rose, just a notch, just enough to show them the pressure she had been holding under that flat calm all day. There isn't another plan, Corporal. Miller is dying on that cot. The ceiling won't drop. There's no air. There's no other route out of this valley that a two-man team owning the high ground won't shoot to pieces. Somebody has to give them a target, and it has to be somebody who can survive being the target. And that's me. That's the whole reason I'm the one who walks out to that OP and not you. Not because you're not brave, because you die out there and I might not, because I've spent 20 years learning exactly how not to be where the bullet goes. Ryan stared at her. His jaw worked. He wanted to argue. Every instinct he had wanted to argue. Then I'm coming with you, he said. No, I'm your spotter now. You said it yourself. You need eyes on the second thermal, and the drone feed cuts out every 90 seconds. I've watched it happen. You need a human being out there calling what the drone can't. So I'm coming. Mitchell. You gave me a job, Morgan. Keep the room calm. Well, the room's about to watch you walk out and bait two snipers, so the room is not going to be calm, so that job's done. New job. I spot. That's what spotters do. They go where the shooter goes. He was already checking his gear. Teller went where you went. I read it in your face when you said his name. He was on your left. So I'll be on your left. And this time the shooter isn't going to miss, and this time the spotter comes home. It was, without question, the cruelest and kindest thing anyone could have said to her, and it landed on Claire Morgan like a physical blow. For 1 second, one raw, unguarded second, the woman who had not flinched all day looked like she might come apart. Then she gathered it back in, all of it, and what was left was something harder and clearer than before. If you come, she said, and her voice was very quiet, you do exactly what I say. When I say it, no hesitation. When I say down, you're already down. When I say still, you stop breathing. I am not bearing a second spotter, Corporal. I won't survive it. Do you understand me? I understand you. Say it back. Down means already down. Still means stop breathing. No hesitation. He met her eyes. I've got you, Morgan. Let's go get these two off our mountain. Alvarez stepped in. The feed's up. Intermittent, but it's up. I'll run it from here and relay whatever I can before it drops. Dawson, you're on the notch through the main scope. You call the shooter the second he surfaces. Ortiz, keep Miller alive. He looked at Claire and Ryan. You two, I don't have the authority to order you to do this, and I sure as hell don't have the authority to stop you. So all I'll say is, come back, both of you. That's not an order. That's a request from a tired old sergeant who's seen enough men not come back. We'll come back, Claire said. She did not say she promised. Dawson noticed that. She never once said she promised. The move to the forward observation post took 11 minutes, low and slow and silent. And every meter of it, Claire could feel the valley watching, could feel the disciplined patience of two men who had owned this ground all day and did not yet know that the thing hunting them had finally decided to bleed a little to find them. Ryan stayed on her left. He did not speak. He had, it turned out, the discipline she needed when it counted, and she filed that away. Another correction to her first impression of him, the loud one, the doubter, the man who had told her to make coffee and was now crawling through the snow on her left flank, ready to die, calling wind for her. They reached the opie she set up, and now came the part that turned Ryan Mitchell's blood to ice water, because now Claire Morgan deliberately, calmly rose into a firing position that showed a clean silhouette against the gray and made herself a target. Morgan, he breathed, you're skylined. They'll see you. That's the idea. She was scanning the notch. Dawson, you copy? I'm in position. When the shooter surfaces, I need the call. Dawson's voice came thin through the radio. Copy. Nothing yet. Nothing. Come on. Come on. Movement. Movement in the notch, Morgan. He's up. He's up. I see him. He's ranging you, Ryan said, his whole body one tight wire. Morgan, he's got a beat on you. He's ranging. If you're going to move, you move now. Not yet. Morgan. Not yet. I need the ranging round. I need him to shoot. Hold. And Ryan Mitchell had to lie there in the snow on her left and watch a man 1,600 meters away take aim at the woman beside him and do nothing because she had said hold. And holding was the whole job, and Teller's ghost was in the space between them, making sure he did not break. The shooter fired. The round came in high and left, a ranging round cracking off the rock 2 meters over Claire's head. And in the half second of that impact, Claire Morgan's mind did more work than most people do in a week. Impact high left, shooter's holding low for the wind. That puts him center notch -1 meter. I have him, she said all in one breath. Mitchell, the correction. Where does the spotter look? Watch the spotter. And Ryan, who had been watching not the shooter, but the rock band around him exactly as she'd told him, saw it. A flicker, a second thermal shape, upslope and right, turning its head to call the correction to its partner. Spotter, upslope right, 30 meters off the shooter, higher band. He's calling the correction. Morgan, he's right there. I have both, Claire said. Down, Mitchell, all the way down. Do not lift your head no matter what you hear. Down. Ryan went down. Already down, no hesitation. Face in the snow, and the last thing he saw before the world narrowed to the sound of her breathing was Claire Morgan settling into the stillness he had watched her wait for all day. The perfect, impossible stillness. The fidget gone, the doubt gone. 20 years of missed shots and one dead spotter, and a room full of men who had laughed at her, all narrowing down to a single point of absolute calm. The shooter fired again, his corrected shot aiming at where he thought Claire was. He was a half-second too late, because Claire had already fired first. Ryan heard her rifle crack, and then in the space of one held breath, he heard it crack again, the second shot coming so fast on the first that they almost blurred into a single sound, faster than he would have believed a bolt could cycle, faster than 3 seconds, faster than the spotter could turn his corrected shooter into a second threat. And then nothing. The valley went silent. Not the silence of waiting, a different silence. A final one. The silence of a mountain that has been holding its breath for 11 hours suddenly, completely, letting it go. Ryan Mitchell lay in the snow with his face down, not daring to move, because she had said, "Do not lift your head no matter what you hear." And he heard nothing, and the nothing stretched on, and terror flooded him, because what if the nothing meant she was hit? What if the second shooter's corrected round had found her in the half-second she was exposed? What if he was lying in the snow next to a second dead shooter, and he had promised? He had said, "This time the spotter comes home." He had said it to her, and to Teller's ghost, and to himself. "Morgan," he whispered. "Morgan, talk to me. Are you hit? Are you hit?" For one horrible second, nothing, then quietly exhausted, human. "I'm not hit." Ryan let out a breath that came from somewhere near his soul. "Both of them?" he asked. He still had not lifted his head. "Both of them." Her voice was flat, drained, the voice of someone who has spent everything they have. "Shooter first." Spotter turned to see what happened to his partner. That half second he wasn't looking at his scope. "That's when I took him." A long pause. "You can get up now, Corporal. It's over. You can get up." Ryan Mitchell lifted his head out of the snow. He looked at her. She was still behind the rifle, but she was not aiming anymore, just resting her forehead against the stock. Her eyes closed, and he understood that she was not celebrating, would never celebrate. That for Claire Morgan, a shot like this was not a triumph, but a debt. One more weight added to the weight she already carried. 2 more men who would not go home so that 2 on the cots could. "Alvarez," Ryan said into the radio, and his voice broke on it. "Alvarez, both hostiles down, both confirmed. The ridge is clear. The valley is clear. Get me that helicopter. Get Miller out." She did it. Morgan did it. Both of them, 3 seconds apart at 1,600 meters. She did it. The radio erupted. He could hear the shelter behind him, 400 meters back, erupting too. The sound of 11 exhausted, terrified men, suddenly, wildly, believing they were going to live. But Claire Morgan did not move. She stayed with her forehead against the stock, eyes closed. And Ryan Mitchell, who had told her to go make coffee, who had called her a photo op, who had promised her spotter's ghost that this time it would be different, crawled the small distance across the snow to her left side and put a hand on her shoulder. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey, you came back, and I came back. Both of us. You hear me, Morgan? This time you brought your spotter home." And Claire Morgan opened her eyes and looked at the loud, doubting man who had become, in the space of one afternoon, the first person in a very long time she had let stand on her left. And something in her face finally cracked, not into weakness, but into the exhausted grief of a soldier who has carried a ghost for years and has just, for one moment, been allowed to set it down. "Yeah," she said. "Yeah, Corporal. This time I did." Behind them, faint and rising, came the sound the whole valley had been praying for all day. Rotors. A helicopter, punching in low under the ceiling that was never supposed to drop. Coming for the wounded. Coming because a woman most of them had laughed at had cleared the ridge that made the whole valley a grave. And in the shelter, Private Dawson was on his feet with tears frozen on his face. And Sergeant Alvarez had his eyes closed and his lips moving in something that was not quite a prayer and not quite a thank you. And Ortiz was already prepping Miller for the litter, telling him, hold on. They cleared it. They cleared the ridge. You're going home." And out at the forward, OP, in the sudden strange quiet of a battlefield that had run out of enemies, Ryan Mitchell sat in the snow beside Claire Morgan and did not say anything else, because there was nothing else worth saying, and because he finally understood the thing she had tried to tell him hours ago in a shelter full of doubt. The strongest person in the room is rarely the loudest. Sometimes she is the one who lets you doubt her, who lets you laugh, who lets you believe she is failing because she knows something you don't yet know. and she is willing to carry your contempt on her back all the way to the moment it turns, silently, completely, into something that will make you ashamed. You ever laughed and grateful for the rest of your life that you were wrong. The helicopter came in fast and left faster. Miller and the second wounded man loaded and gone in under 4 minutes. And as the rotor noise faded down the valley, Claire Morgan finally allowed herself to stand up all the way. And the moment she did, her legs nearly went out from under her. Ryan caught her elbow. Easy, easy, I've got you. I'm fine. You're not fine, you just fired the 2 hardest shots I've ever seen a human being take, and you've been holding it together for 11 hours. Sit for a second. If I sit, I won't get up. She said it plainly, not as a complaint, just as a fact about her own body that she had learned somewhere along the way. The trick is, you don't stop until it's actually over. And it's not over. We still have to walk back, and I still have to write the report, and I still have to. She stopped, swayed. Okay, maybe I sit for a second. She sat. Ryan crouched beside her, and for a moment neither of them said anything. In the quiet of the cleared valley settled over them like the first real peace either of them had felt all day. Can I ask you something, Ryan said. You ask a lot of questions for a sniper. I'm a spotter now. You said so yourself. A ghost of a smile. Spotters ask questions. That's the job. Claire almost laughed. It came out as more of a breath. Ask. The second shot. The spotter. You said you took him in the half second he turned to look at his partner. Ryan turned to face her. How did you know he'd turn? How did you know he wouldn't just keep his eye on his scope and put a round through you the second your flash gave you away? Claire was quiet for a moment, watching the ridge that no longer held anything alive. Because he loved his partner, she said. Ryan blinked. What? 2-man teams. You spend enough hours in a hole with a man, close enough to whisper, sharing the same water and the same fear, and something happens. You stop being 2 soldiers. You become 1 animal with 2 heads, and when one head gets hit, she exhaled, the other one looks. Every time. It's not tactics. Tactics say keep your eye on the scope, keep hunting, avenge him after. But nobody follows tactics in that half second. Nobody. Because the man beside you just got hit, and the oldest thing in you, older than any training, has to look, has to know. I knew that spotter would turn to look at his shooter because I know what it is to have somebody on your left, Corporal. I know exactly what it does to you when they go quiet. The words landed in the snow between them, and Ryan Mitchell understood that she had just told him something enormous. That the shot that had saved all their lives had been made possible not by her skill with a rifle, but by her grief. That she had reached into the worst day of her own life, the day Teller went quiet on her left, and used the shape of that wound to predict exactly how another man would break. You used Teller, he said quietly, to take that shot. You used what happened to you. I used what I learned, Claire corrected. There's a difference. Teller didn't die so I could make a shot 8 years later. Teller died because I was young and scared, and I let a colonel push me into a bad round. She met his eyes. But I'll be damned if I let it be for nothing. Everything I know about how a man breaks when his partner goes quiet, I know because of Teller. So yeah, he was on that ridge with me today. He's on every ridge with me. That's not a burden, Mitchell. That's the only thing that makes the burden mean anything. Ryan had to look away for a moment because there was something in his eyes that a corporal with 11 confirmed engagements did not let other soldiers see. We should get you back, he said, when he trusted his voice again. Alvarez is going to want a full. Yeah, she got to her feet, steadier now. Let's go tell the room. The walk back to the shelter took 9 minutes, and every one of those minutes Ryan Mitchell was rehearsing something in his head because there was a thing he needed to do and he did not know how to do it, and men like him never did. They came through the flap and the shelter erupted. Dawson got to her first, the young private who had watched the whole thing through the main scope, who had called the shooter surfacing, who had wept openly when the ridge went silent, threw military bearing out the window entirely, and grabbed Claire Morgan in a hug that lifted her off her feet. You did it, he kept saying. You did it. You did it. I watched it. I watched both of them go down. 3 seconds. I timed it. 3 seconds. Morgan, 3 seconds. 2.8 actually, came a dry voice from the corner. Alvarez. He was smiling, which nobody in the unit had seen him do in about a week. I was watching the drone clock, 2.8 seconds between rounds. At 1,600 meters, on two targets, one of which you located after you'd already fired the first shot. He shook his head slowly. In 31 years, Morgan, I have never seen anything like it. And I've seen a lot. I had a good spotter, Claire said, setting Dawson back on his feet. You had Mitchell, Alvarez said, and there was a question buried in it because everyone in that shelter had heard the way Ryan spoke to her that morning. The coffee, the photo op, the promise that she would miss. And here it came, the thing Ryan had been rehearsing the whole walk back, and he found that all his rehearsing was useless because the only way to do it was to just do it, in front of everyone, out loud, the way she had done everything out loud all day. Can I have the room? Ryan said. The shelter quieted. Everybody, just listen for a second. He turned to face them all, and then he turned to face Claire, because the point of it was that she had to be looking at him when he said it. This morning, I told this soldier to go make coffee. I told her she was a photo op. I told her in front of all of you that she was going to miss, and that when she missed, I'd be the one who called it, and you'd all remember I called it. He swallowed. Well, you're going to remember something, all right, but it's not that. Mitchell, Claire started. No, I need to say it right. His jaw worked. I've been a soldier for 16 years, and this morning I forgot the single most important thing 16 years is supposed to teach you, which is that you do not know what's inside a person by looking at the outside of them. I looked at her and I saw the newest thing in the room, and I dumped every ounce of my own fear on her because it was easier than admitting I was out of answers. That's the truth. That's the ugly truth. And I'm saying it out loud because she said her ugly truth out loud today. She told a room full of strangers who wanted her to fail that she'd missed shots before, that she'd lost a man, and that took more guts than anything I've ever done under fire. He looked at her. So I'm going to match it. Sergeant Morgan, I was wrong about you in every way a man can be wrong about another human being. And I'm sorry. And I'll say it to anyone, anywhere for the rest of my career. Ryan Mitchell was wrong, and Claire Morgan carried this whole unit off this mountain. The shelter was dead silent. Claire Morgan looked at him for a long moment. And when she spoke, she did not do the thing people expected, did not wave it off, did not say it was nothing, did not make it comfortable for him. Thank you, she said simply. That was hard to say, and it mattered that you said it. A pause. And for what it's worth, Corporal, you were the best spotter I've had since Teller. I don't say that lightly. I don't say his name lightly. You earned standing on my left today. Not many people do. And that, to Ryan Mitchell, meant more than any medal he had ever been pinned with, because he understood now what her left side was. Understood it was a grave and a shrine and the most protected place in her whole world. And she had just told a room full of soldiers that he had earned a place in it. It was 15:47 hours when the second radio call came in, and it turned the celebration to ash. All stations, priority traffic, be advised, this is no longer an exercise. Repeat, this is no longer an exercise. The shelter went cold. Say again, Alvarez said into the radio, his voice suddenly hard. Say again your last over. Command has lost contact with the exercise control element. The two hostiles engaged on the objective ridge were not, repeat not, part of the training scenario. O4 role players are accounted for and were never deployed to that ridge. Unknown armed persons have been operating inside the training area. Threat is assessed as real. All units go weapons hot and assume active hostiles. Acknowledge, over. Nobody in the shelter moved. Dawson's face had gone white. What did he just say? What did he just say? They weren't role players. They weren't. He turned to Claire. The men you shot, the two on the ridge, they were. He couldn't finish it. They were real, Claire said quietly. She had gone very still. The whole time, the wind, the discipline, the two-man team, the way they owned the valley. I said it hours ago. I said he wasn't a kid. I said he was disciplined. I said it was a good team. I didn't know how good. I didn't know they were real. But part of me, she stopped. Part of me knew something was wrong. Role players in a training exercise don't shoot to wound and then hunt the wounded. Role players don't displace to bait a counter sniper. What we were up against all day was never a training problem. It was a killing team, and they were very, very good at it. The full weight of it settled over the shelter. Every man in that room recalibrated the entire day. The wounded had been really wounded, the rounds had been real rounds, and the two shots Claire Morgan had made at 1,600 meters had not saved them from a hard grade on a training exercise. They had saved them from being hunted down and killed, one by one, in a valley with no way out. How? Ryan said. His voice was raw. How does an armed killing team get inside a live U.S. military training area? That's above all of us, Alvarez said grimly. And it's the wrong question for right now. Right question is, he keyed the radio. Command, this is Shelter Element. Be advised the two hostiles on the objective ridge are confirmed KYA, engaged and neutralized approximately 40 minutes ago by a member of this element. Ridge is clear. Say again, the ridge is already clear. Over. There was a long pause on the radio. Shelter Element confirm. You are reporting the two unknown hostiles are already neutralized? Affirmative. Both KIA, 1,600 meters, one shooter. She took both of them. Another pause. Longer. Shelter Element, be advised. If that is accurate, the individual who made that engagement may have just saved this entire unit's lives, and we need a full debrief the moment you are secure. But be further advised. A two-man team does not operate alone. If there were two inside the wire, assume there are more. Do not, repeat, do not assume the area is clear. Hold your position, maintain security, extraction is inbound, but weather is limiting us. Estimated 90 minutes. Over. 90 minutes. 90 minutes, Dawson repeated. 90 minutes in a shelter, in an open valley with maybe more of them out there, and we don't know how many or where. Then we make it 90 minutes, Claire said. And just like that, she was working again. The exhaustion shoved back down beneath the surface where she kept everything. Alvarez, we need to reposition. This shelter's location is compromised. Both dead hostiles had eyes on it all day, which means anyone they were reporting to knows exactly where we are. We can't be here when the next team comes looking for why their killers went quiet. Agreed, where? Claire was already pulling out her worn notebook, the one full of 11 hours of wind and light and the rhythm of a valley she now knew better than anyone alive. There's a fold in the terrain north-northeast, about 300 meters. Defilade, blocks line of sight from the high ground on three sides. I logged it this morning when I was reading approaches. If I were bringing in a second team, that's the one piece of ground in this whole valley I couldn't touch. She looked up. We move there. We set security. We make them come to us across open ground, where the advantage flips to us for once. Ryan was staring at her notebook. You logged a fallback position this morning before any of us even trusted you, before you'd fired a single shot. I log everything, Corporal. She stood, gathering her gear. That's the job. The shot is 1%. The other 99 is knowing the ground so well that when everything goes wrong, and it always goes wrong, you already know where to run. She slung her rifle. I didn't know there were real killers in this valley this morning, but I knew that if there were, that fold in the ground was where I'd want to be. So I wrote it down, and now we're all going to be glad I did. They moved in 7 minutes, low and fast and disciplined. Claire on point because she was the only one who had memorized the ground. Ryan on the rear because he was the only one she trusted to hold a rear that mattered. Dawson stayed tight to the center with the extra gear, and Alvarez ran comms as they went. And every meter of that 300 meters was the longest 300 meters any of them had ever crossed, because now they knew the enemy was real, and now they knew there might be more. And every rock on every ridge was a place a shooter might be lying, watching, waiting, the way two shooters had watched and waited all day. They reached the fold. Claire had been right, of course. It was a perfect piece of ground, low and protected, with clean fields of fire across the open approaches and hard rock at their backs. They set security, and then they settled in to wait out the 90 minutes, and the waiting was worse than anything that had come before because, at least when they thought it was an exercise, the worst case was a bad grade. At 16:12 hours, 25 minutes into the wait, Dawson, watching the western approach, said the words that stopped every heart in the fold. Movement, west, 200 meters, something's moving in the rocks. Claire was beside him instantly. Glass up. Show me. Slow. Point with your words, not your hand. Base of the Western Rock Band. There's a gap between two boulders. Something moved through it, low, left to right. I only caught it for a second. Claire scanned, held, scanned again. And there it was, low, careful, disciplined. A man moving the way the two dead men on the ridge had moved, and behind him barely visible a second shape. Two of them, Claire breathed. At least two, moving on our old position. They're going to the shelter. Her jaw tightened. They found their dead friends' reports. They know where we were, and they're moving to hit the shelter, which is empty, which buys us maybe 4 minutes before they realize we're not there and start reading the ground for where we went. And then they read the same ground you read, Ryan said grimly, and they find the same fold you found. And then they find us, Claire finished. Yeah. So what do we do? Claire lowered the glass, and for a moment she was very still, and everyone in that fold watched her think, watched her run the same kind of calculations she'd run all day, wind and angle and timing, and the shape of how men break. We don't wait for them to find us, she said. Waiting was right when I was hunting one hidden team from cover. It's wrong now. Now they're the ones moving across open ground, and every second they spend clearing that empty shelter is a second they're exposed, and I'm not. So I don't wait. She brought the rifle up. I take them while they're stacking on an empty tent, wondering where we went. Dawson, you spotted them. You call them for me. Mitchell, watch our flanks, because if there's a third one, he's going to move the second I fire, and I won't have eyes for him. You're going to take 2 moving targets, Ryan said, across 200 meters, while they're maneuvering. 200 meters is a chip shot after the day I've had, Corporal. And for the first time all night, there was the faintest edge of something, almost like grim humor in her voice. 1,600 was the hard part. 200 I could make in my sleep. The only hard part now is the timing. I have to take the first one clean and silent enough that the second one doesn't know what happened until it's too late for him to find cover. She settled in. Dawson, the lead man, talk to me. Dawson steadied his voice. He's approaching the shelter flap, slowing down. He's signaling to the second one. Second one's holding back, covering. Classic stack, lead man's about to enter. That's my moment, Claire said. When the lead man commits to entering, the cover man's attention goes to the flap, watching his partner's back, not watching the valley. That's when he's blind to me. Her fingers settled alongside the trigger. Wait for it. Wait. Lead man enters on my shot. Cover man's eyes are on the flap. 3, 2. And at that exact moment, Ryan Mitchell, watching the flanks as she had told him, caught a flicker of movement to the south, the opposite direction, and his blood turned to ice because there it was, the thing she'd warned about, the thing Command had warned about. Third man, he hissed. South, Morgan. There's a third one. He's flanking us. He's already inside 100 meters. He's got a line on us. Claire did not lift her eye from the 2 men to the west. She had a shot on 2 enemies committing to an empty shelter, the perfect shot, the one she'd set up, and now there was a third man to the south about to have a clean line on her whole team, and she had 1 rifle and 1 direction it could point, and about 1 second to decide which threat to answer. Mitchell, she said, absolutely level, absolutely calm, the calm of a woman who had lived inside impossible seconds her whole career. Can you take the third man? Your rifle, your shot, south, 100 meters. Can you make it? Ryan's throat closed. 100 meters was nothing. 100 meters was a shot he'd made 1,000 times. But not with her life and Dawson's and Alvarez's riding on it, not in the 1 second before a flanking shooter fired first. I can make it. Then here's what happens, Claire said, still not lifting her eye from the west. On 3, I take my 2 to the west. You take your 1 to the south. Same heartbeat, both of us, no hesitation. If either of us is slow, somebody in this fold dies. You spent all day watching me wait for the perfect shot. This isn't that. This is the other kind. The kind where you trust your training and you trust the man beside you and you just take it. Can you do that? Can you trust me and take it? I can trust you, Ryan said, and he brought his rifle around to the south and settled on the flanking man. And for the first time in his career, Ryan Mitchell understood what it meant to be part of one animal with 2 heads. The thing Claire had described. the thing that had let her read a dying spotter's grief from 1,600 meters. He was on her left. She was on his right. And they were about to fire in the same heartbeat at two different enemies in two different directions, trusting each other completely. And if either of them flinched, they all died. Dawson, Claire said, count us down. Your call. When the lead man enters that flap, you say now and we both fire on now. You own this. Understand? I own it, Dawson whispered. This young private who 12 hours ago had been one of the men who let Ryan laugh at her, now trusted with the single word that would decide whether any of them lived. Claire's finger settled on the trigger, her two targets to the west. Ryan's finger settled on his one target to the south. And the whole valley, the whole 11 hours, the whole day of doubt and grief and earned respect, came down to a 19-year-old private watching a killer approach an empty tent, waiting for the exact half-second to say one word. Steady, Dawson breathed. Steady, lead man's at the flap. He's lifting it. He's committing. The lead man stepped into the empty shelter. Now, two rifles fired as one, in the same heartbeat, in two directions, and the sound rolled out across the valley and came back off the ridges. And then, for the second time that day, the mountains went completely and utterly silent. The silence held for 3 full seconds, and in those 3 seconds, Ryan Mitchell did not breathe, because he did not yet know if he had made his shot, and not knowing was the worst feeling in the world. Then Dawson, glass up on the west, said, both west targets down. Lead man dropped inside the flap. Cover man dropped where he stood. Both down, both still. And Claire, without lowering her rifle, said, Mitchell, your man, report. Ryan forced himself to look through his own scope, to the south, to the flanking man who had been 100 meters out and closing. The man was down, not moving. Ryan had made the shot he'd made 1,000 times on a range and never once with 4 lives riding on a single heartbeat, and he had made it. South man's down, he said, and his voice shook, and he did not care that it shook. He's down, I got him. Confirmed? Confirmed, he's not moving, he's done. For a moment, nobody in the fold said anything, because 5 men had just become 5 corpses across that valley, and the arithmetic of the day had turned into something none of them had signed up for that morning when it was still supposed to be a training exercise. 5, Alvarez said quietly from where he'd been running comms. 5 hostiles, 2 on the ridge, 3 coming for the shelter. 5 armed men inside a live U.S. training area. That's not a raid. That's not a crossing. That's an operation. His jaw was tight. Somebody planned this. Somebody put 5 trained shooters inside the wire on the exact day this unit was running a live exercise. That's not luck. That's intelligence. Somebody knew we'd be here. The words dropped into the fold like a stone, and Claire Morgan finally lowered her rifle and turned and looked at Alvarez. And Ryan saw something cross her face that he had not seen all day. Not during the 1,600-meter shot, not during the bait, not during any of it. He saw her get still in a new way, a thinking way, a way that scared him. Say that again, she said. Somebody knew we'd be here. No, the other part. 5 trained shooters on the exact day of a live exercise. Claire's eyes had gone distant, the way they'd gone when she was reading winds she couldn't see. Sergeant, who knew the exercise schedule for this valley? Alvarez frowned. Command, exercise control, us, standard distribution. How far in advance? The schedule locks 2 weeks out. Why? Claire was quiet, and then she said the thing that turned the whole day inside out. Because 5 armed men didn't wander into a training area by accident on the one day it was occupied, she said. They were placed, positioned, in advance, which means they had the schedule, which means somebody with access to that schedule gave it to them. She looked around the fold at the exhausted faces. We didn't stumble into an enemy today. We were the target, this whole exercise. Somebody wanted this unit in this valley so 5 shooters could take it apart, quietly, in a place where the sound of rifles is exactly what everybody expects to hear. Nobody would have questioned gunfire in a live fire exercise. Nobody would have come looking until we missed a check-in. By then, we'd all be dead and the shooters would be gone, and it would look like a training accident, a tragedy, an investigation that finds nothing. The fold was silent. Dawson's face had gone gray. You're saying somebody set us up. Somebody on our side. I'm saying somebody with access to that schedule sold it or used it, Claire said. So I don't know who, I don't know why, but I know that 5 trained men with our timetable didn't get here by accident. And I know that the only reason we're alive to figure that out is that they made one mistake. What mistake? Ryan said. Claire almost smiled, and it was the grimmest thing he'd ever seen. They didn't know about me. The schedule said this unit. It didn't say a counter sniper from advanced reconnaissance would get pulled in at the last minute because a general somewhere wanted. She stopped. Because a general somewhere wanted a photo op. Ryan felt the words hit him like a physical blow because he'd said them. That morning he'd called her a photo op, a decoration, a thing command sent for a brochure, and now she was standing in a fold in the ground telling him that the last-minute decision that put her in this valley, the decision he'd sneered at, was the only reason any of them were breathing. The photo op, he said hollowly. The thing I threw in your face. That's what saved us. Maybe, Claire said. I don't know why they sent me, Corporal. Maybe it was a brochure. Maybe somebody upstairs had a feeling. Maybe it was pure dumb luck. But whatever the reason, I wasn't in that schedule 2 weeks ago, and the men who planned this didn't account for me, and that's the gap we live through today. She looked at him steadily. So the next time you want to dismiss somebody as a token, as a decoration, as somebody who's only there to make a picture look good, you remember this valley, because the person everybody underestimates is the exact person nobody plans for. And the person nobody plans for is the person who wrecks the plan. It was 16:31 hours when Alvarez got command back on the radio and relayed Claire's assessment, and the response came back fast and cold and confirmed everything. Shelter element, be advised. Your assessment is consistent with what we're seeing on this end. Exercise control element was found. 2 personnel deceased. Communications sabotaged. This was a coordinated action. You are directed to hold your secure position and touch nothing on the hostiles until investigative personnel arrive. Extraction and security element inbound, revised ET, A40 minutes. And shelter element, the individual who made these engagements. What's the name? Alvarez looked at Claire. Claire nodded. Staff Sergeant Claire Morgan, Alvarez said into the radio. Advanced reconnaissance attached to this element this morning. A pause. Understood. Advise Staff Sergeant Morgan that as of right now, based on preliminary assessment, she is the reason there is a unit left to extract. Command out. The radio went quiet. And in the fold, 12 soldiers, no, 11 now, plus 1 attachment, looked at the woman. Half of them had laughed at that morning, and there was not one man among them who did not understand exactly what they were looking at. Dawson was the first to move. He straightened up, and then, deliberately, formally, he came to attention and saluted her. It was not regulation exactly, in the middle of a secured position with hostiles down all around them. But nobody corrected him. Because sometimes a salute isn't about regulation. Sometimes it's the only thing a 19-year-old kid has to say what he doesn't have words for. Claire looked at him for a moment, and then she returned it, crisp and clean. At ease, Private, she said gently. We're not out yet. Eyes back on your sector. There were 5. Command found sabotage. I want to be very sure there weren't 6. Dawson dropped the salute and snapped his eyes back to his sector, but there was something different in him now, a straightness in his spine that had not been there that morning. And Ryan understood that the kid had just found something in this valley that would shape the rest of his life. A picture of what the job was really supposed to look like, worn not by the loudest man in the room, but by the quietest. The 40 minutes crawled, they held their sectors, and they watched the ridges, and nobody spoke much because there was too much to think about, and thinking was dangerous when you still had a valley to watch. But somewhere in those 40 minutes, Ryan Mitchell found himself beside Claire again, both of them watching the western approach, and he found he had one more question, the one that had been sitting under all the others all day. Can I ask you the real one? He said quietly. You've been asking real ones all day, Corporal. Not this one. He kept his eyes on the sector. This morning, when I said all those things, the coffee, the photo op, you didn't fire back. You didn't put me in my place. You could have. God knows you had the standing to after, but even before you'd proven anything, you just took it, absorbed it. Why? How does a person just take that and not need to hit back? Claire was quiet for a long moment. Because hitting back is expensive, she said finally. It costs you focus. It costs you the thing you actually came to do. That morning, I had two men bleeding on cots and a killer on a ridge, and I had a choice. I could spend my energy proving to you that I belonged, winning the argument, making you respect me, or I could spend it on the wind. She glanced at him. I've only got so much, Corporal. Everybody does. And I decided a long time ago I wasn't going to spend mine on people who'd already decided who I was. Not because it doesn't hurt. It hurts. Every time. I just decided the win was more important than my pride and Miller was more important than my pride. And the truth is, so were you, even when you were being a jackass, because you were a soldier in my valley, and my job was to get you out of it, whether you respected me or not. Ryan Mitchell had to look away again. You'd have made that shot for me, he said, even if I'd never stopped, even if I doubted you right up to the end. I'd have made that shot for you if you'd spat in my face on the way out the door, Claire said simply. That's the job. You don't save the people who respect you. You save the people who are there. The respect is nice. It's not the point. The point is everybody goes home. And there it was, the thing Ryan Mitchell would carry for the rest of his life. The thing that would make him a different kind of soldier and a different kind of man. Everybody goes home. Not the ones who deserve it. Not the ones who believe in you. Everybody. That was what she'd been doing all day, quietly, patiently, absorbing his contempt and reading the wind, and refusing to spend her strength on anything but the one thing that mattered. He had spent 16 years thinking strength was the ability to dominate a room. He was learning on the worst and best day of his career that real strength was the ability to serve a room that didn't even want you. At 17:11 hours, the extraction came in, 3 helicopters this time, and a security element that flooded the valley and locked it down, and investigators who moved to the bodies with cameras and evidence bags in grim quiet efficiency. A colonel came off the lead bird and moved through the secured position asking sharp questions, and when he found Alvarez, the first thing he said was, "Where's Morgan?" Alvarez pointed. The colonel crossed to her. He was a hard-looking man, gray at the temples, the kind of officer who had seen enough to be unimpressed by almost anything. He stopped in front of Claire Morgan and looked at her for a long moment. "You're the one who took the 2 on the ridge," he said. 1,600 meters, 2.8 seconds apart, located the second target after your first round. "Yes, sir." "And then took 2 more to the west and coordinated a simultaneous engagement on a flanker to the south. My spotter took the flanker, sir. Corporal Mitchell. His shot, not mine." The colonel's eyes flicked to Ryan, then back. "But you called it." "We called it together, sir, and Private Dawson called the timing. It wasn't one person. It was the whole element." The colonel was quieted for a moment, and something in his hard face shifted, because officers of his rank learned to hear the difference between false modesty and the real thing, and this was the real thing. "Sergeant Morgan," he said, I'm going to be straight with you, because I think you've earned straight. This was an infiltration, a planned one. 5 hostiles, our schedule, our valley, sabotage control element. Somebody wanted this unit erased and made to look like an accident, and the only variable those planners didn't have was you, because your attachment to this element was decided, he paused, and something almost like discomfort crossed his face. Was decided 48 hours ago by me on what I'll admit was close to a whim. I had a reconnaissance asset available and a feeling I couldn't explain, and I attached you to a routine exercise for reasons I could not have justified on paper. The fold went very quiet. "A whim," Claire said. "A whim," the colonel confirmed. "I've been doing this 30 years, Sergeant, and every once in a while you get a feeling you can't explain, and you learn to trust it or you learn to regret it. I trusted it. I don't know why I sent you. I just knew that unit was going into that valley, and I wanted my best long gun attached, and something told me not to leave it to chance." He looked at her. "I sent you as insurance I didn't think I'd need, and it turns out you were the only thing standing between this entire unit and a mass grave. So," he straightened, "so whatever you were told about why you were coming, whatever anybody in that shelter said to you about being a decoration or a token or a photo op. So yeah." And here his eyes moved deliberately to Ryan Mitchell, and Ryan understood that command had already read the preliminary statements, already knew what had been said that morning. You were not any of those things. You were the plan. You just didn't know it, and neither did I. And you performed beyond anything I have seen in 3 decades of service. I'll be putting you in for a decoration that reflects that, and I'll be telling this story in rooms where it matters. And you should know that a lot of people are alive tonight who have no idea they owe it to a shot most of them would have said was impossible. Claire Morgan was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, she did not do the things soldiers do when a colonel praises them. She did not glow. She did not thank him for the decoration. She said something else. Sir, with respect, the men I want you to remember aren't me. She nodded toward the cots that were no longer there, toward the helicopter that had carried Miller away hours ago. There were 2 men bleeding out on cots this morning, and they're alive tonight in a hospital somewhere, and nobody's going to give them a medal because all they did was survive. And there's a private over there. She nodded at Dawson, who's 19 years old and had to watch all of this and call the timing that kept us alive. And he's going to have nightmares about today for years, and he did his job perfectly. And there's a corporal, she looked at Ryan, who made a 100-meter shot with 4 lives riding on it in the 1 second we had, and who stood up in front of his whole unit and admitted he was wrong about me, which is the hardest thing a proud man ever does. She looked back at the colonel. If you want to tell this story in rooms that matter, sir, tell that one. Not the shot, the people. The shot was just physics. The people were the miracle. The colonel looked at her for a long, long moment, and then slowly he nodded, and there was something in his face that was close to awe and closer to respect than awe. Sergeant Morgan, he said, in 30 years I have handed out a lot of medals, and I have learned that the people who deserve them most are almost always the ones who try to hand them to somebody else. He nodded. I'll tell that story, all of it. You have my word. It was 1738 hours when they finally loaded onto the helicopters, and as the birds lifted off and the valley fell away beneath them, the valley that had been a grave and had become, because of one woman, a place where 12 men lived instead of died, Ryan Mitchell found himself sitting across from Claire Morgan in the red interior light, and he leaned forward so she could hear him over the rotors. You said something this morning, he said, in the shelter, before any of it. You said skill doesn't have a gender, and courage doesn't have a uniform style. I didn't hear it right when you said it. I heard it like a slogan, something you say. He paused. I hear it different now. How do you hear it now? Claire said. I hear it as a fact, Ryan said. Like the wind, like the drop of a bullet over 1,600 meters. Just a true thing about the world that I was too stupid to see this morning and can't unsee now. He shook his head. I've got a daughter, Morgan. She's 7. She wants to be a soldier, and every time she says it, some part of me flinches because I know what rooms like that shelter are like. I know how men like me talk, and I always figured I'd steer her towards something easier, something where nobody'd tell her to go make coffee. He looked at her. I'm not going to say that anymore. If she wants this, I'm going to tell her about a valley in Colorado and a woman who let a whole room laugh at her because saving them mattered more than her pride. And I'm going to tell her that's what strong looks like, not loud. That. Claire Morgan looked at him across the red-lit space, and for the first time all day, all the way through the impossible shots and the bait and the grief and the exhaustion, her eyes went bright just for a second before she blinked it back. Tell her one more thing, she said quietly. Anything. Tell her the doubt is going to come, no matter how good she gets. It never fully goes away. There's always going to be a room that laughs, and the trick isn't to make the laughing stop. The trick is to stop needing it to stop. She held his eyes. You do the work. You read the wind, you make the shot, and you let the room figure out on its own who you are, in its own time if it ever does. Because you're not there for the room's approval, Corporal. You're there so everybody goes home. Teach her that, and she'll be all right. Teach her that, and she'll be better than all right. She'll be the one nobody plans for. And Ryan Mitchell nodded and did not trust himself to say anything else. And the 3 helicopters flew on through the gray Colorado sky, carrying 12 living soldiers and 5 body bags, and one story that would be told, exactly as she asked, in rooms that mattered for years to come, out of the mountains where a woman most of them had laughed at had quietly, patiently, at 1,600 meters and at 100 and at every distance in between, refused to let a single one of them die. The story did not end when the helicopters landed. In some ways, that was where the harder part began. 3 months later, at a base in the Colorado foothills, Staff Sergeant Claire Morgan sat in a plain briefing room across from four investigators, and for the fourth time in as many weeks, she walked them through every second of that day. The infiltration had cracked open into something enormous. 5 dead shooters had turned out to be the visible edge of something that reached into places nobody wanted to talk about. A leaked schedule, a sabotaged control element, a plan to erase a unit and call it an accident. And Claire, the one variable nobody had planned for, had become the single most important witness to all of it. "Walk us through the moment you realized they were real," one of the investigators said. "Not role players, real." "I didn't realize it," Claire said. "I suspected it hours before command confirmed it. Role players don't shoot to wound and then hunt the wounded. That's not training behavior. That's killing behavior. Somewhere around the third hour, part of me knew. I just didn't have the authority to declare it, and I didn't have anything better to do about it than exactly what I was already doing, which was trying to clear that ridge." "And you didn't tell your element?" "No." "Why not?" Claire looked at the investigator steadily, because a scared soldier and a calm soldier shoot exactly the same when the moment comes. But the scared one is miserable for every hour in between. Telling them there were real killers in the valley wouldn't have changed a single thing I did. It would have just added terror to an already impossible day. So I carried it alone until it mattered. That's part of the job too, deciding what to carry so the people around you don't have to. The investigators exchanged a look. They had interviewed a lot of soldiers. They did not often hear it put like that. What Claire did not tell them, because it was not their business, was how much those 3 months had cost her. The night she didn't sleep, the way the number 5 sat on her chest at 3 in the morning. 5 men who had families somewhere. 5 men who had been trying to kill her and hers. 5 men she had ended and would carry now alongside Teller. Because that was the arithmetic of what she did, and nobody who did it honestly ever got to put the arithmetic down. She had made the shots that saved 12 lives. She did not, on the worst nights, feel like a hero. She felt like a woman who had added 5 more names to a list she'd been carrying since a ridge 8 years ago. A woman who understood better than anyone that the people who are best at this are the ones who feel its weight the most. But she went to work. She read the wind. She made the shots on the range. And she let the weight be part of her without letting it run her, which was the only way anyone survived a life like hers. It was in the 4th month that the story got out. Not the classified parts, but the shape of it. The way stories always find a way. A woman, 1,600 meters, 2 shooters, 2.8 seconds. A unit that lived because command sent an attachment on a whim. And suddenly Claire Morgan, who had never wanted attention in her life, who measured her strength precisely by how little she needed a room's approval, found herself the subject of exactly the kind of attention she had always avoided. She hated it. She said so to the one person who understood. Ryan Mitchell had stayed in touch. That was the thing that surprised her most out of the whole ordeal. Not the medal, not the investigation, but the fact that the loud, doubting corporal who had told her to make coffee had become, over 3 months of phone calls and a shared testimony schedule, something close to a friend. He called her the week the story broke. "They're going to want to make you a symbol," Ryan said. "You know that." "I know. You're going to hate it." "I already hate it." "You want my advice?" A pause, and she could hear him smiling on the other end. "Do the thing you did in the shelter. Don't argue with it. Don't spend your energy fighting the picture they want to paint. Just keep doing the work and let them figure out who you actually are in their own time. That's what you told me, right? You're not there for the room's approval." Claire was quiet for a moment. "You've been listening." "I've been listening for 4 months, Morgan. You changed how I do this job. You changed how I'm raising my kid. The least I can do is throw your own words back at you when you need them." And that, more than any medal, was what the day in the valley had actually produced. Not a hero, a changed man, and through him, a changed 7-year-old girl who would grow up hearing about a woman in Colorado who let a room laugh at her because saving them mattered more than her pride. That was the real yield of that impossible shot. Not the 2 men on the ridge, the people who walked away different. The ceremony came in the 6th month, a decoration, the kind that gets read into a permanent record, the kind that ends up in rooms that matter, exactly as the colonel had promised. Claire stood at attention while they read the citation, And she listened to a description of her own actions, read aloud in the flat, formal language of the military, 1,600 meters, engaged and neutralized, coordinated simultaneous engagement, saved the lives of the entire element. And she felt, standing there, the strange dislocation of hearing the worst and best day of your life turned into 3 paragraphs of official prose. But she had asked for one thing, and the colonel, who kept his word, had granted it. Because when the ceremony ended and the ranking officers had said their piece, the colonel stepped back to the microphone and said, there was one more thing, at the specific request of the recipient. And then he read 3 more names into the record. Corporal Ryan Mitchell for a 100-meter shot made under impossible pressure with 4 lives at stake. Private First Class Daniel Dawson for calling the timing that coordinated the engagement that saved his element at 19 years old in his first real action. And Specialist Marcus Miller, who had survived his wounds and returned to duty, for the simple, unglamorous courage of staying alive on a cot while the people around him fought to save him. Claire had insisted, if they were going to tell her story in rooms that mattered, they were going to tell all of it. The shot was physics. The people were the miracle. She had said it in a fold in the ground with corpses cooling around her, and she meant it just as hard 6 months later in a clean ceremonial room with medals on the table. Dawson found her afterward. He was still 19, still young, but there was something settled in him now that had been raw in the valley. He came to attention the way he had in the fold, and this time it was regulation. And this time Claire let him hold it a beat longer before she returned it. I almost quit, he said. After the nightmares, I almost put in my papers. But you didn't. No, Geisa. He looked at her. Because every time I got close, I thought about you sitting behind that scope for 11 hours, carrying it alone so the rest of us wouldn't have to. And I figured if you could carry what you carry and keep going, I could learn to carry mine. He paused. I'm going to be a good soldier, Sergeant. Not a loud one. A good one. Like you showed me. That's the promise I'm making. That's the one I want you to hear. Claire looked at this kid, this 19-year-old, who had watched something terrible and chosen to become better instead of broken. And she felt something loosen in her chest that had been tight for 6 months. Maybe for 8 years. I hear you, Dawson, she said. And I'll tell you the same thing I told Mitchell. The doubt's going to come. There's always going to be a room that laughs. You don't make the laughing stop. You stop needing it to. She put a hand on his shoulder. You're going to be all right, Private. Better than all right. Now go be the soldier you just promised to be. And he did. That was the thing about promises made in the wake of a day like that. Some of them held. Dawson's held. He would make it a career, and he would carry quietly the lesson of a valley in Colorado for 30 years. And someday he would be the steady one in a shelter full of scared soldiers, and he would think of her. The investigation eventually reached its conclusions, most of them classified, some of them ending careers of people who had never once set foot in that valley but had signed off on the schedule that put 5 killers inside it. Justice of the slow institutional kind, ground forward. Claire testified when they needed her and otherwise stayed out of it, because she had learned long ago that you cannot carry every fight, only the ones in front of you. Only the ones where you can actually save somebody. And she went back to work. That was always where she went. Back to the range, back to the wind, back to the patient, endless discipline of a craft that did not care how many medals you had. The wind at 1,600 meters was exactly as hard to read after the ceremony as it had been before. That was the thing she loved about it, in the end. It kept her honest. A rifle does not know your reputation. A crosswind does not care about your citation. Every shot is the first shot. Every day, you earn it again. Ryan asked her about that once, near the end of that year, over a beer they'd finally gotten around to, the one she'd promised him in the shelter if they both made it off the mountain. They had both made it off the mountain, so they drank the beer. Does it ever stop, he asked, the having to prove it? You made the most impossible shot I've ever seen. You've got the citation. Everybody in the reconnaissance community knows your name now. Does it ever stop? The doubt, the having to earn it again every time you walk into a room? Claire turned her glass slowly on the table. No, she said, and I stopped wanting it to a long time ago. Ryan waited. When I was young before Teller, I thought the goal was to get so good that nobody could ever doubt you again, Claire said. I thought there was a finish line, A point where you'd proven it so completely that the laughing would stop forever and you could finally rest. She looked up at him. There isn't. There's no finish line. There's always another room, another ridge, another kid who looks at you and sees the newest thing instead of the most capable thing. If I'd tied my piece to making the doubt stop, I'd have spent my whole life miserable because it never stops. So what do you tie it to? The work, Claire said simply. The wind, the shot, the people who go home. I tie it to the only things that are actually mine, the things no room can give me and no room can take away. Whether they clap or whether they laugh, the wind is still the wind, and Miller still went home, and that's still true at 3 a.m. when nobody's watching. She took a drink. You want to know the secret, Corporal? The strongest person in the room isn't the one who's beaten the doubt. It's the one who stopped needing to. Who does the work, whether you believe in her or not? Who saves your life, whether you respect her or not? Who lets you laugh and reads the wind anyway, and gets you home anyway, and never once needs you to say she was right? Ryan Mitchell sat with that for a long time. You did that, he finally said. In the valley. Every bit of that. I try to do it every day, Claire said. Some days better than others. That's all any of us can do. The story became, in time, exactly what Claire had never wanted and exactly what the world needed. It got told in training rooms, the way the colonel had promised. Young soldiers studied it, and the ones who studied it right didn't focus on the 1,600 meters or the 2.8 seconds, because those were just numbers, just physics, just a woman who'd done the work. The ones who studied it right focused on the 11 hours of waiting, on the woman who let a room laugh at her because winning the argument would have cost her the wind, on the choice made over and over across the worst day of her career to spend her strength on the mission instead of her pride. Because that was the real lesson, the one underneath the rifle. It was never about the shot. It was about every person who had ever walked into a room and been measured by the outside of them and found wanting. Every person who had ever been told, in words or in looks, that they didn't belong, that they were a decoration, that they should go make coffee. Every person who had ever had to decide whether to spend their life arguing with that room or whether to simply, quietly do the work until the work spoke for itself. Claire Morgan's answer had never been an argument. From the first minute in that shelter to the last name read into the record, her answer had been the same. She did not argue. She did not need them to believe her. She opened her rifle case, and she read the wind, and she waited for the window, and when it came, she made the shot that no one thought was possible, not to prove them wrong, but because 2 men needed to go home, and she was the one who could get them there. And in the end, the men who had laughed became the men who told her story. Ryan Mitchell told it to his daughter, who grew up and put on the uniform and walked into rooms of her own, carrying a lesson from a valley she'd never seen. Dawson told it for 30 years, to scared soldiers in shelters of their own. The colonel told it in rooms that mattered. And somewhere in all that telling, a truth got passed down that was bigger than one woman and one shot on one frozen ridge in Colorado. Skill does not have a gender. Courage does not have a uniform style. And excellence does not need anyone's permission to exist. They laughed at her shot range. And then, at 1,600 meters in 2.8 seconds, with everything she had, Staff Sergeant Claire Morgan taught an entire battlefield the one thing it would never forget. The person you underestimate is the person nobody plans for. And the person nobody plans for is the person who saves them all. She never asked them to believe in her. She just brought every last one of them home. The bonus story, an epilogue set 2 years after the Valley. 2 years is a long time in the Army. People rotate, units reshape. The men who were in that Colorado shelter scattered across the world the way soldiers always do. And the day that had bound them together became, for most of them, a thing they carried privately. A story they didn't tell at parties because nobody would believe it and because the parts that mattered most couldn't be explained to anyone who hadn't been there. But some threads don't break. And on a warm spring afternoon at Fort Carson, 3 of those threads came back together in a way none of them had planned. Claire Morgan was 31 now. She had made Sergeant First Class. There were more lines around her blue-gray eyes than there had been in that valley, and a little more gray threaded into the dirty blonde hair when she let it down, which was rarely. She was an instructor these days, teaching advanced marksmanship to soldiers who were mostly younger than the war stories they'd grown up on. She was good at it. She had discovered, somewhat to her own surprise, that the same patience that let her wait 11 hours for a window also let her wait out a struggling student, let her explain the same principle 6 different ways until the 7th one finally landed. The quietest teacher on the range, and somehow the one everyone wanted. She did not tell her students about the valley. She taught the wind, the drop, the discipline, the endless, unglamorous work. She let the physics speak for itself, the same way she'd always let everything speak for itself. But every now and then, when a young soldier got frustrated, when they wanted to rush the shot, when they said the words she'd heard 100 times, "That's impossible, nobody could make that," she would get very quiet, and she would say, "Impossible is just a word people use for work they haven't done yet. Do the work, then tell me what's impossible." They didn't know why the line landed so hard. She never explained. But it landed. It was on one of those spring afternoons between relays on the range that a familiar broad-shouldered figure came walking across the grass toward her, and Claire Morgan felt something in her chest she almost never felt, which was the simple, uncomplicated warmth of seeing an old friend. Ryan Mitchell had made Sergeant First Class too. He was 36 now, a little grayer at the temples, the heavy build gone slightly softer, but the strong jaw and the steady brown eyes exactly the same. He'd put in for a training billet at Carson specifically, though he'd never quite admitted why, and Claire had a suspicion the why had a lot to do with the fact that she taught here. "They told me the best long gun instructor on this post was some legend nobody could get a straight story out of," he said, stopping in front of her, grinning. "Figured I'd come see if it was who I thought it was." "Mitchell," she almost smiled. From Claire, an almost smile was a standing ovation. "You look old." "I feel old. You look exactly the same, which is deeply unfair." He looked out over the range at the young soldiers on the line, and something moved across his face. "So this is what you do now. You make more of you." "I try. Most of them are better than I was at their age." "That's a lie, and you know it. Nobody's better than you were." He said it easily, a settled fact between old friends, no flattery in it. "How have you been, Claire? Really?" And she told him. Not everything. She never told anyone everything, but more than she told most people, because Ryan Mitchell had earned the place on her left a long time ago, and nothing since had taken it away. She told him about the nights that still came, less often now, but still, when the number 5 sat on her chest at 3 in the morning. She told him about Teller, whose name she still spoke on certain days, out loud, alone, because she'd promised herself long ago she would never let his death be for nothing, and part of keeping that promise was refusing to let him become just a story. She told him the weight hadn't gotten lighter exactly. She'd just gotten stronger and gotten better at carrying it, which she'd decided was the only kind of healing a person in her line of work ever actually got. "You?" she asked. Ryan was quiet for a moment, and then he told her the thing he'd come to tell her, the real reason for the training billet, the real reason he'd walked across that grass. "You remember my daughter," he said. "Emma. She was 7 when we were in the valley. You said she wanted to be a soldier. You said you were going to steer her towards something easier, and then you changed your mind." Ryan's face did something complicated. "You remember that." "I remember everything you said in that valley, Mitchell. Same as I remember the wind. It's the job." He laughed, a little unsteady. "She's 9 now, and she still wants it. Wants it worse than ever, actually. And I did what I said I'd do. I never steered her away. Every time she asked, I told her about Colorado, about a woman who let a whole room laugh at her because saving them mattered more than her pride, about what strong actually looks like. Not loud, quiet." He swallowed. "She's got your story memorized better than I do, Claire. She calls you the Wind Lady. She doesn't know your name. I never told her your name. I don't know why. Maybe because you'd hate being a legend to a 9-year-old. But she knows the shot. She knows the 11 hours. She knows everything except the ending, which I always leave out because she's 9 and the ending's got body bags in it." Claire looked at him. "Why are you telling me this, Ryan?" And Ryan Mitchell, who had spent 16 years learning that real things come out sideways for men like him, looked her dead in the eye and said it straight, the way she taught him. "Because she's here, at the visitor center. My wife brought her out for the day, And I never once told her she'd ever get to meet the Wind Lady, because I never thought it'd happen, and if you say no, I will completely understand, because you didn't sign up to be a hero to a 9-year-old, and I'd never put that on you." He took a breath. "But if you said yes, if you'd let her meet you, Claire, I think it would be the single most important thing that ever happened to that kid. And I had to ask. I had to at least ask." For a long moment, Claire Morgan didn't say anything. Here was a thing very few people understood about her. The medals, the citation, the story told in rooms that mattered. All of it had always sat wrong on her, like a coat 2 sizes too big. She had never wanted to be a symbol. She had spent her whole career measuring her strength precisely by how little she needed a room's approval, and being made into a legend was, in a strange way, its own kind of prison, because a legend isn't a person, and Claire had fought her whole life to just be allowed to be a person who did the work. But a 9-year-old girl who wanted to serve, who had grown up hearing about the wind and the waiting and the choice to save a room that laughed at you. That wasn't a room's approval. That was something else. That was the whole reason any of it had ever meant anything. "What's her favorite part?" Claire asked quietly. Ryan blinked. "What?" "Of the story. You've told it to her for 2 years. She's got a favorite part. Kids always do." "What is it?" Ryan's throat worked. "The 2 hours, when you didn't shoot. She loves that part. She always asked me to tell the part where you waited, and everybody thought you were scared, but you weren't. You were just knowing." She says, his voice caught. She says, "That's the bravest part, Dad, because everybody was looking, and she just waited anyway." And Claire Morgan, who did not cry, who had not cried in that valley through any of it, felt her eyes go hot, because a 9-year-old girl she had never met had understood the exact thing that most decorated colonels never grasped, that the courage was never the shot. The courage was the waiting. The courage was letting them think you were failing because you knew something they didn't, and you were willing to carry their doubt on your back all the way to the truth. "Yeah," she said, and her voice was rougher than she meant it to be. "Yeah, Ryan, I'll meet her." They walked to the visitor center together, and the whole way Ryan talked too much, nervous, the way he'd been nervous in the valley before he'd learned to trust her. And Claire let him, because she understood that a father walking his daughter toward her hero is entitled to be nervous. Emma Mitchell was 9 years old, with her father's steady brown eyes and her mother's lighter hair, and she was sitting on a bench swinging her legs and looking bored the way 9-year-olds look bored. Right up until her father said, "Emma, there's someone I want you to meet." And then he said, "This is Sergeant First Class Claire Morgan." Emma's legs stopped swinging. You could see her working it out. The name meant nothing at first. And then something shifted behind her eyes, some connection forming, and she looked up at her father, and back at Claire, and back at her father, and her voice came out very small. "Dad, is she?" "Yeah, baby," Ryan said softly. "She's the Wind Lady." For a second, Emma Mitchell just stared, and then she stood up off that bench so fast she nearly fell over, and she came to attention. A 9-year-old's version of attention, spine straight, chin up, the pose her father must have taught her, and she held it there, trembling slightly, not knowing what else to do in the presence of the person she'd been dreaming about for 2 years. Claire Morgan looked at this small, serious girl standing at attention on a spring afternoon, and something in her, some knot that had been tied since a ridge 8 years ago, since a valley 2 years ago, since a lifetime of walking into rooms that laughed, came quietly and completely undone. She lowered herself down to one knee so she was level with the girl. And then she did something she almost never did for anyone. She returned the salute, slow, crisp, formal, real, the way you'd salute a soldier. "At ease, Emma," she said gently. Emma dropped the salute and just stood there, eyes huge. And then all the questions came out at once, the way they do with kids, tumbling over each other. "Did you really wait 2 hours? Were you scared? How far is 1,600 meters? Is it really far? My dad says it's really far. Did the wind really keep changing? How did you know when to shoot? How did you know?" Claire laughed, a real one, rare and warm. "One at a time, one at a time." She settled back on her heel. "Yes, I really waited 2 hours. And yes, I was scared. I'm always a little scared. Anybody who tells you they're not scared is lying or they're not paying attention." Emma's brow furrowed. But Dad says being brave means you're not scared. Your dad's a great soldier, but he's wrong about that one. Claire glanced up at Ryan, who was watching with his hand over his mouth. Emma, listen to me because this is the most important thing I know, and I'm going to give it to you the same way somebody gave it to me a long time ago. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. Being brave means you're scared, and you do the work anyway. You read the wind anyway. You wait anyway. Even when everybody's looking at you. Especially when everybody's looking at you and they don't believe you can do it. She held the girl's eyes. Your favorite part of the story, the waiting. Your dad told me. You know why that's the bravest part? Emma shook her head. Because anybody can pull a trigger, Claire said. That's easy. That's 1 second. The hard part, the brave part, is sitting still while a whole room thinks you're failing and trusting what you know over what they think. That's the part nobody claps for. That's the part that isn't in the movies. And you understood it when you were 7 years old, which means you understand something most grown soldiers never figure out. She smiled. You're going to be a good one, Emma, not a loud one, a good one. Emma Mitchell looked like someone had handed her the entire world. That's what she says about me, she whispered, turning to her father. Dad, that's what you said she said about you. Ryan Mitchell couldn't speak. He just nodded, his eyes wet, 36 years old and undone by watching the two most important lessons of his life pass from the woman who taught them to him into the daughter he'd spent 2 years preparing to receive them. They spent the whole afternoon together. Claire took Emma out to the edge of the range at a safe distance and showed her a weather meter, the same kind she'd held for 11 hours in that shelter. She let Emma hold it, watch the little numbers change, feel the wind on her face, and try to guess what the meter would say before she looked. Emma got it wrong the first 4 times and right the 5th, and the pure incandescent joy on her face when she got it right was a thing Claire Morgan would carry for the rest of her life, right there alongside the harder things, a small, bright weight to balance the dark ones. That's it, Claire told us. That's the whole secret. You just felt the wind before the machine told you. That's what took me 20 years. And you did it when you were 9. She crouched down. Keep doing that, Emma, your whole life. Feel the thing before the machine tells you. Know the thing before the room believes it. And never, ever let anybody make you rush the shot. Late in the afternoon, as the light went gold across the range, Emma asked the question Claire had been waiting for, the one Ryan had said he always left out. How does the story end? Dad never tells me the end. Claire and Ryan exchanged a look over the girl's head. And Claire, who had spent her whole life deciding what to carry so the people around her didn't have to, made a decision. The story ends with everybody going home, she said simply. That's the end, Emma. Every single person your dad was with that day, they all went home. That's the only ending that ever mattered to me. Not the shot, not the medal. Everybody went home. She looked at Ryan. And your dad went home. To you, that's the real ending. That's the one worth telling. And that was true. It was the truest thing she could have said. And it was also, gently, the version a 9-year-old should carry. The body bags left out, not because they hadn't happened, but because a child deserved to inherit the light of the story before she had to inherit its weight. Time enough for the weight later. For now, the light. When it was time to go, Emma hugged her, fierce and sudden the way kids do, arms around Claire's neck, and whispered, "Thank you, Wind Lady." And Claire held on a second longer than she meant to. Ryan lingered after Emma ran ahead to her mother. He stood in front of Claire in the gold light, the loud, doubting corporal from a frozen shelter. Now a graying father who'd spent 2 years turning the worst and best day of his life into a gift for his daughter. I don't know how to thank you, he said. You already did. Claire looked out at the range, at the young soldiers packing up, at the wind moving invisible across the grass. You raised a kid who understands that the waiting is the brave part. You took what happened in that valley and you made something good out of it. That's the thing, Ryan. That's the only thing. We don't get to choose what happens to us on the ridge. We only get to choose what we make out of it after. She turned to him. You made her. That's what you made. That's worth more than any shot I ever took. Ryan Mitchell nodded, unable to speak, and then he did the thing that had taken him a whole day to learn how to do 2 years ago, and that came easy now. He came to attention, and he saluted her, and this time there was nothing complicated in it. No doubt, no wounded pride, just one soldier honoring another. one friend honoring a friend. Claire returned it. And then Ryan jogs to catch up with his family, and Emma turned and waved one more time, the whole of her small future waving with her, and Claire Morgan stood alone on the edge of the range in the Gold Spring light and watched them go. And for once, the weight she carried felt exactly balanced by the light. She had never wanted to be a legend. She had only ever wanted to do the work, read the win, make the shot, and get everybody home. And standing there watching a 9-year-old girl carry her lessons off into a life that hadn't even started yet, she understood that she'd done something better than becoming a legend. She'd become a beginning. The Win Lady. The first line of a story that would keep going long after she was gone, in a girl who already knew at 9 years old that the bravest thing in the world is to be still when everyone is watching and to trust what you know over what they believe. So, the wind moved across the range. Claire Morgan felt it on her face and smiled and knew exactly what the meter would say before she ever looked. And somewhere down the road, in a car heading home, a 9-year-old girl was already telling her mother about the wind and the waiting and the bravest part of the story, carrying it forward the way the best things are always carried forward. Not loud, just true, all the way home.